Secretary Hegseth, you have been lying to the American public about this war from day one, and so has the President. You have misled the public about why we are at war. Department of Defense, you are ultimately responsible for the conduct of the Iran war. Any unvarnished review of what is happening right now in the Middle East would reveal a geopolitical calamity, a strategic blunder resulting in worldwide economic crisis. The result, we know what we have lost, but what have we gained? Let's consider that the regime in Tehran is still intact, with new and more radical leadership, as are Iran's ballistic missile and drone successes. The strategy has been an astounding incompetence, doing immense economic damage to America.
Mr. Chairman,
and the
Mr.
world.
Chairman, with the personal attack on the Secretary, he should have an opportunity to respond.
Representative John Garamendi unleashed a brutal attack on Pete Hegseth, accusing the Defense Secretary and President Trump of misleading Americans about the Iran war. He called the strategy an astounding incompetence and demanded to know what America had actually gained.
What is in question is the purposes and the strategic direction of this war. Mr. Hegseth, as Secretary of the Department of Defense, you are ultimately responsible for the conduct of the Iran war. Any unvarnished review of what is happening right now in the Middle East would reveal a geopolitical calamity, a strategic blunder resulting in worldwide economic crisis. The result of Trump's war of choice is a serious, self-inflicted wound to America. It will take years and a new administration to recover from the grave damage to our standing in the world, as well as our economy and our military. We must remember that 13 Americans have been killed in action, hundreds wounded, and thousands of civilians killed, including more than 100 school children. The risk of this conflict was foreseeable. I'm certain that the Department of Defense knew that it was likely that in a war with Iran would create an international economic crisis by blocking the Strait of Hormuz and thus stopping 20% of the world's oil. Was this existential threat considered?
By the time of this hearing, the Iran conflict had already disrupted global energy markets, with the Strait of Hormuz becoming a major point of concern. The hearing itself came as lawmakers were increasingly questioning how long the conflict would last and what the economic consequences would be.
Apparently not. During the 60 days of Trump's Iran war, critical munitions have been expended at an alarming rate, depleting magazine levels below what is thought necessary to hold China at bay. It will take years and tens of billions of dollars to restock. A significant part of the necessary Navy and Marine force in the Pacific has been removed and sent to support the Iran war. Our support of Ukraine has suffered as supplies and defense systems are diverted to the Iran war. America has lost irreplaceable aircraft, radar systems, and strategic bases have been shown to be vulnerable. The continued lengthy deployment of ships, equipment, and personnel has sacrificed readiness. We know what we have lost, but what have we gained? Let's consider that the regime in Tehran is still intact, with new and more radical leadership, as are Iran's ballistic missile and drone forces, as is Iran's ability to rebuild their military industries. Also, as is Iran's coordination with China, Russia, and North Korea, and Iran's ability to choke off global energy supplies, and their stockpile of highly enriched uranium, which they only built after President Trump shredded President Obama's Iran deal in 2017.
The concerns about military resources were not just theoretical. Pentagon officials told lawmakers during this same hearing that the Iran war had already cost about $25 billion, largely because of munitions expenditures. Democrats also warned that the conflict was drawing down weapons needed for other priorities, including deterring China.
Secretary Hegseth, you have been lying to the American public about this war from day one, and so has the President. You have misled the public about why we are at war. You and the President have offered ever-changing reasons for this war. You've misled the public about the progress of the war. While the military has executed this war with tactical success, the strategy has been an astounding incompetence, doing immense economic damage to America.
Mr. Chairman,
And the
Mr.
world.
Chairman, with the personal attack on the Secretary, he should have an opportunity to respond.
He certainly
Thank
will
you.
when
No,
I...
no,
It
no.
is-
No, at the time
When I
you're
am
doing it.
finished.
It's the gentleman's time. He can use it as he sees fit and add an extra 5 seconds to Mr. Garamendi's time.
Thank you. You and the President have ever-changing reasons for the war. You have misled the public about the progress of the war. While the military has executed this war with tactical success, the strategy has been an outstanding example of incompetence. This war of choice is a political and economic disaster at every level. Despite the President's promise to lower the cost of living, gas prices are up 40%, and inflation is soaring so much for lowering the cost of living. The President has got himself and America stuck in the quagmire of another war in the Middle East. He's desperately trying to extricate himself from his own mistakes. It is in America's and indeed the world's interest that he succeed in that.
The latest developments make Representative John Garamendi's warning about the strategic and economic consequences of the Iran war especially relevant. The conflict has continued far beyond the period discussed in this April hearing, with the United States maintaining a naval blockade of Iranian ports and facing an unresolved confrontation over the Strait of Hormuz. On August 13th, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth said the U.S. Navy could maintain the blockade indefinitely while negotiations with Iran remain stalled. The Strait of Hormuz remains the central strategic problem. Shipping through the waterway has fallen sharply, and Iran has continued challenging U.S. efforts to control maritime traffic. Recent reporting says Iranian attacks on commercial shipping have increased, while Washington has continued using military and economic pressure rather than reaching a final settlement. At the same time, a covert U.S. shipping corridor has reportedly moved roughly 10 million barrels of oil per day through the strait, about half the pre-war volume, showing both the continuing disruption and the Pentagon's effort to mitigate it. That context gives Garamendi's questioning a much larger significance. His central argument was that winning individual battles is not the same thing as winning a war strategically. He began by deliberately separating the military personnel from the political leadership. Garamendi praised American service members for their courage and professionalism, making clear that his criticism was aimed at the administration's purpose and strategic direction, not the troops carrying out the missions. Then he turned directly toward Hegseth. His argument was that the administration had entered conflict whose consequences should have been foreseeable, particularly the possibility that Iran could disrupt the Strait of Hormuz and trigger a global energy crisis. That concern has become one of the defining issues of the conflict. Garamendi argued that the United States had potentially exposed itself to several strategic costs simultaneously: depleted munitions, reduced Pacific readiness, diverted military assets, disruption to Ukraine assistance, damaged aircraft and radar systems, and prolonged deployments. His most important question was essentially, what did America actually gain? Garamendi argued that Iran's political system remained intact and that Tehran retained significant missile, drone, and military-industrial capabilities. He therefore challenged the administration's claim of strategic success. The criticism was not that American forces had failed tactically. In fact, Garamendi explicitly acknowledged that American forces had achieved tactical successes. His argument was that those successes did not necessarily translate into a successful overall strategy. That distinction is crucial. A military can destroy targets, eliminate weapon systems, and win individual engagements while still facing a strategic problem. If the opposing government survives, the conflict continues, military stockpiles are depleted, and the economic consequences expand. And that is precisely the argument Garamendi was making against Hegseth. He also accused Hegseth and President Trump of repeatedly changing their explanations for why the war was necessary and overstating the progress of the conflict. Those are serious political allegations, and Hegseth strongly rejected the broader criticism. The April 29th hearing became one of the most contentious congressional examinations of the war, with Hegseth accusing critics of being reckless and defeatist while defending Trump's decision to strike Iran. The Pentagon estimated at that point that the war had already cost the United States approximately $25 billion. The subsequent course of the war provides an important test of Garamendi's warning. The United States and Iran did reach a temporary memorandum and ceasefire arrangement in June, but the arrangement did not produce a durable resolution. The U.S. blockade was lifted temporarily and then reinstated in July. Iran subsequently declared the strait closed, while the United States responded with further strikes and renewed maritime pressure. By August, the conflict remained unresolved. Hegseth was still defending the blockade, while Iran continued resisting U.S. demands concerning the strait. Recent reporting also indicates that more than 750 U.S. troops have been wounded since the war began, adding another dimension to the readiness and human cost concerns Garamendi raised. So Garamendi's central question, what have we gained, remains the strongest way to frame this confrontation. The administration can point to damaged Iranian military infrastructure, degraded capabilities, and U.S. control over important maritime operations. Critics can point to the continued conflict, disrupted global energy flows, military expenditures, casualties, pressure on readiness, and the absence of a durable political settlement. The real strategic test is therefore not simply whether American bombs hit their targets. It is whether the United States ultimately emerges more secure, more strategically prepared, and economically stronger, or whether it traded short-term military victories for a longer and more expensive confrontation. Garamendi's attack was fundamentally about strategy versus tactics. His message to Hegseth was, you may be winning individual military engagements, but if Iran remains capable of fighting, Hormuz remains contested, American resources are being depleted, and the conflict keeps expanding, how can you call the overall strategy a success? And with the confrontation still unresolved months later, that question has become even harder to dismiss. If the United States can maintain military pressure but still cannot secure a lasting settlement or fully reopen the Strait of Hormuz, is that a strategic victory or simply a prolonged stalemate?